In this podcast, Christopher Bishop, a rockstar and a futurist, uses his crystal ball of knowledge to talk about future of work and jobs. So, stay tuned. So, welcome everyone to episode of Jobs of Future. And I couldn't have asked for a better guest. He actually cares about jobs of future, and soon we'll all see and learn. And welcome to Christopher Bishop. A brief bio. So he has had many different careers since he graduated from Bennington College with BA in German literature. He has worked as a touring rock musician. So we have a rock star. So I always wanted to interview a rock star. That's helpful. Played with Robert Palmer. Jingle producer, sang on the first Kit Kat jingle. Give me a... Oh, wow. That's a surprise. Nice. And website project manager, developer, Johnson & Johnson's first corporate website. Chris has also spent 15 years at IBM in a variety of roles, including business strategy consultant and communication executive, driving social media adoption and use of virtual worlds. Chris is a member of the World's Future Society and gave a talk at their annual conference in Washington, D.C. last summer on how to succeed on jobs that don't exist yet. In addition, he's on the board of TEDxTimesSquare and gave a talk on openness at the New York event in April 2013. Chris writes, consults, and speaks about improvising careers at universities' industry conferences. With that, welcome so much, Chris, to coming on our podcast.
Thank you, Vishal. I'm delighted to be here. Look forward to our conversation.
This is fascinating. So I'm so excited. At the same point, I'm sort of shivering that I'm talking to a rock star. So I should better behave. So why don't you walk us through your journey to the current role?
Yeah. So I get a good place to begin is Bennington College. So I went to a small liberal arts school in Vermont where you had to define your education. You had to put together a plan for what you were going to learn and how you were going to learn it, and then defend it in front of like a tribunal, sort of like the way PhD dissertation, not nearly that robust, but that kind of model, because they expected you to own your own learning experience. And I've taken that model and applied it over the past 45 years to navigate successfully through, I think, 7 careers so far. I'm working on number 8 right now. Mm-hmm. From being touring rock musician to ending up at IBM. I think one of the key takeaways, again, back to the Bennington model, is being able to learn, unlearn, and relearn, identify skills gaps, and figure out how to address them. And do that over and over and over again. And I think that's the exciting thing, is that that's sort of the model for today's learners, right? So U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics says they're going to have 8 to 10 jobs by the time they're 38. So the way to succeed in that new model is to be able to recognize what's coming and what you're going to have to learn to be successful in these new career models, and then do it again and do it again.
Interesting. That's pretty cool. So and walk us what are you doing nowadays? Like what's your current gig like?
Well, so after my 15 years at IBM, I retired using IBM big blue parlance, right? About 5 years ago, and I've been working as a futurist and as a speaker and a writer. I do lots of different things. I have sort of the other sort of current work model is tied to the gig economy, right? And being a contingent worker. So I have half a dozen projects going on at any given time. As I was saying before, I'm coming up to Boston in a couple of weeks to speak at an artificial intelligence conference at the Harvard Club. I just did a report on cybersecurity for the Institute for the Future based in Palo Alto. They hire me as a researcher and writer. I do a lot of freelance writing for a tech PR firm based in San Francisco called Bird Factory. I'm speaking again at the World Future Society event in August. I run what I call Future Career Invention Workshops. I was just at the Texas STEAM Summit in Houston in mid-January, talking to teachers about future jobs and how it ties to curriculum and project-based cross-discipline learning, how they need to rethink what they teach and how they teach. So those are some of the things I'm doing.
Interesting. Wow. So I
Yeah.
think when I was looking at your profile, I was fascinated with the diversity of your experiences, right? And then how open and how up front you are in sharing those experiences, and definitely helping us understand the future of work and future of jobs. So
Sorry, somebody's calling. Sorry about
okay,
that.
no, it's okay. So I definitely want to have your perspective on, among your interactions that you're talking today, and you're talking at very futuristic conferences, talking about future of work, we're talking about intelligence of AI technology in reshaping tomorrow's like workforce. What are some of the anxieties are you seeing, as an passive observer, or maybe active observer, when you talk to these conferences and meet people? What are some of the anxieties, if you can share?
Like anxieties, like what people are anxious about.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's always good to take a step back. And people are, they're apprehensive about technology taking away jobs,
Hmm.
which is certainly understandable. But again, when I talk about this and write about it, I think it's good to keep in mind that this is a process that's been going on for hundreds, if not thousands, of
Hmm.
years. Right? Technology has been disrupting work models in various ways, for a long, long time. And then we need to sort of keep that in mind, keep that perspective when we're thinking about the way technology is going to disrupt the job economy. One of my favorite books, we're going to talk about books maybe more later, but a book that I used to reference when I was working at IBM is called Technological Revolutions in Financial Capital.
Hmm.
It's written by a Cambridge professor, a woman named Carlotta Perez. And in it, she describes 5 cycles, beginning with an innovative discovery, some sort of crash and or rationalization, and then a period of incorporation or standardization.
Hmm.
So that's gone on since she begins with the sort of the revolution in textile manufacturing in England in the in the early 18th century. But she talks about, and the cycles she says she gauges them as 40 to 60 years on average. But she talks about textiles, and then railroads, and then oil, and the transformation of the automobile. And then the information age, that we're in now, and we're moving sort of from the information age into this yet new era. And in fact, I think the scientists have given it a new name, right? The new anthropological time frame. But it's we're in the age of sort of AI and robotics and algorithms and biotech, if you will, transhumanism. So it's sort of the next era. But all my way of saying that there are these patterns that we can look back on and learn from about how jobs transform and morph and evolve.
I think it's exciting. So whenever I hear about this idea of, hey, AI will take away job and everything, right? So it reminds me of a story. So when they were coming up with cars, right? They used to have these carts, and cars somehow used to use more lumber than the carts. And there was a whole gung ho about, hey, we'll be out of forest soon, the world will end, like it'll be a massive trouble and problem. And I think, as you're rightly pointing out, it's just times and again, it keeps on happening to us, and we just fall on that track of, no, like there's other world that we have not seen yet, which is pretty cool. And actually,
Yeah, yeah.
one of the thing that I remember I talking to someone that, hey, talk to this, the one of the best futurists I've ever seen, called Donald Rumsfeld. I said, he just said one of the best thing that you can ever imagine, that his talk about known knowns, known unknowns, and unknown unknowns. I said, whatever you read today, whatever you think, or anyone come up with, or any pundit come up with, it's all known and known unknowns. And world has
Right.
been evolving around unknown unknowns that we have no clue on. So, and that
Yeah.
has been shaping us since then. So,
But I think, again, sort of just to share an anecdote with you about how I sort of came to this revelation. When I moved to New York, I moved to New York after this band broke up. I did 3 albums with this band, McKendree Spring, right after college. Moved to New York, figured I'd see if I could run with the big dogs. Could I cut it, in the heart of the beast and actually make a living as a musician? And knock on wood, I lived in Manhattan for 16 years and was successful as a bass player and then a composer and arranger. But um, along about the mid 80s in New York, technology began to take over the music business. You could
Mm,
digitally
mm,
sample sounds and then store them on a Winchester drive, which was a big, hard disk that slid into a rack. Like 512K was the maximum limit. So I realized that I couldn't really make a living as a bass player per
mm.
se. I need to adapt to this new model. So I learned how to sample and sequence, basically compose on a computer. I bought a Mac, um, and and began working as a musician using my skills that I knew how to play and move that into adopting new technology so that I could actually, make a living using skills that I had and incorporating them into this new work model, if you will. And so looking back historically, I think of examples that we can point to throughout history, like when Henry Ford started cranking out
Mm.
Model Ts in Detroit in 1910, all those farriers and blacksmiths got really nervous.
Right.
Like, what are we going to do now? Um, but the smart ones became auto mechanics,
Hmm.
right? As the carriage trade went away, they adapted their skills to this new job economy and new model, and were successful. So,
Interesting. That's fascinating, by the way. So you said you are a futurist, right? What is like what it takes to be a futurist? Like what are the ingredients of futurist, if I may ask?
well, I think you have to be excited and have a sense of wonder about what's coming, right?
Mm.
Uh, what's going to happen on the planet from a social, cultural, technological, societal perspective, and I'm interested in what's coming. I've always been kind of interested in new stuff, new things. That's just kind of how I'm gated. When I was a musician, I had the first Steinberger bass. It was made out of carbon graphite, made by an industrial designer. I ran a synclavier, which was the state-of-the-art digital musical
Mm.
instrument in New York in the early 90s, right? I was captivated by the web. So I learned how to be a web producer because I thought, well, this will have sort of global social cultural impact and it'll allow me to be employed. And I was interested in the topic. So that's sort of how I became a futurist. I think also you need to be aware of what has come before, right? Be able to take a step back, get big picture perspective. Like I was talking to a guy, I was actually in a meeting in New York this week with a guy who's sort of an AI guy, and he's a designer and somewhat of a futurist, and talks about technology and its implications for culture and business. And we talked about where we begin when we talk about AI, right?
Mm.
The starting point is ENIAC, the first sort of electronic computer that was at the University of Pennsylvania, right in the 40s, I guess 1946 maybe. And the difference between him and me, because I'm a futurist, the place I begin is the Antikythera mechanism. You know what
Mm.
that is?
No.
It's a device that was found off the coast of an island in the Aegean Sea, like a Greek island, right? And it was created. They're not sure when, who created it, but it's about probably dates to 500 BC.
Mm.
And it's a device, a very complex mechanical device used to help humans solve problems.
Mm.
That's the context for me. And it had like a series of gears and toothed wheels, and it could monitor and manage the orbits of the planets, 4 planets closest to the sun. It could
Mm.
map the 4-year cycles of Olympics. It tracks solar eclipses. It was like a wooden and brass box, like 2 feet square. So anyway, that's sort of the futurist perspective. Is like, where are we in the arc of history, and where are we going to be?
And what's your crystal ball in this? Like how do you get your cap of wisdom on what's next?
Well, so I think there are a lot of tools that we can use now, and being in the age of digital communication, access to information is easy with a click of a
Mm.
mouse. You can get to all kinds of data. So, I mean, I look at lots of different sources. Certainly, I look at the elite newspapers. I mean, I read the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post. I also look at MIT Technology Review, a fascinating magazine that's talking about tech trending. I watch BBC Click, which is a TV show where they have weekly episodes looking at what's trending in tech and culture. I read the Silicon Valley Business Journal, which shows kind of where VC money is going and who got funded and who didn't, and who's a unicorn today and who's out of business tomorrow, who got bought. I look at patent filings. I look at regulatory conversations. So it's a wide range of sources for what's trending in business and culture, and then the indicators are what the jobs are going to be that are going to be tied to that trending.
Interesting. Wow. And one more thing I want to ask about you. So that was fascinating to me was you have written you are non-linear multimodal careerist or something like that.
Yeah.
First, what is that, and then what it takes? 'Cause I think so. In our career, like so, having transition maybe once or twice or thrice is like too much. And you have done your seventh move, and now you're on to your eighth one. Like, walk us through that? Like what is through that cycle? Because we'll be seeing a lot more of these. Because the very fact of that element makes you a fantabulous futurist. So yes, if you can walk us through that.
Well, I would say that the thing I'm most excited about in my current role, so career number 8 as a career futurist or whatever, is sharing my perspective with today's learners, and whatever age they are. As I mentioned before, I've spoken to everything from 7th grade career classes to senior executives at outplacement firms thinking about what the new job economy is and how they can participate and be successful. So that's kind of what I've done, is taken my 7 careers and codified how I navigated through them, and I'm putting together guidance around how today's learners can be successful. Again, the criteria are, Bureau of Labor Statistics says today's learners are going to have 8 to 10 jobs by the time they're 38. 85% of the jobs they're going to do haven't been invented yet. That number varies, but that's a general kind of parameter. They're going to be using technology that doesn't exist today. They're going to, it's going to make things like this look archaic. Our grandkids are going to say, "You mean you had to carry something around in your pocket to communicate and interact and get data?" And they're going to be using this technology to solve problems we don't yet know are problems. And it segues into sort of the power of AI. Just a little sidebar, but I think the advancements in technology and AI and robotics are going to help us humans solve problems that have been in the realm of science fiction, that have been intractable to date. But things like addressing cancer and food security and climate management and sustainable energy. So I'm excited to sort of share my insight and perspective, with today's, to give them ideas and also get them excited. It's going to be cool. We're going to do really cool, interesting stuff.
Interesting.
It's going to have global impact that we never were able to do before without this technology.
That's fascinating. So one thing that I hear a lot about from businesses. So I was recently talking to. So I'm advising one of the school in coming up with a data analytics program for 18 months. The moment I hear about 18 months for any particular program, I get this gasp of air coming out of my ear that, hey, really? Like 18 months, can you predict that whatever you're teaching will exist? And it's just, now flipping on the side of a business has the same anxiety as well. Like every day they want to cope up for hundreds and hundreds of years of existence. And when every day is a new day for them, like what are some of your thoughts on how these businesses and individuals could cope up with this rapid change?
Yeah, so I remember having a conversation recently with a millennial who works at IBM, a woman that I know, and she was describing her current sort of model as when she describes what she does to people at a cocktail party or whatever, she says, "Well, I work in social media at a global 50 company during the day, and then at night I'm a DJ. And then on the weekends, I'm a seamstress. I design and make clothing, And I think that's sort of a typical model that people, as I described, my multiple roles too. It's like people don't have one job and work 8 to 5 every day for 30 years. I mean, those days are gone. That model is gone. So from a company perspective, I think they need to keep in mind a couple of things. One is that the typical tenure now, at any company, certainly a large company, is like 18 months to 3 years, right? So I think you've got to realize that going in. When you hire somebody, no matter if they're top talent, I mean, you might try to entice them to stay, and there are ways to navigate through large companies and do lots of different things. I mean, I did lots of different things at IBM, so it is possible. But I think the general premise you have to keep in mind is that people you hire are not going to be at your company for a long time. So you want to train them, you want to encourage them to be creative, you want to give them opportunities to grow, but you also have to be ready for them to leave. And there's a great quote, I think Richard Branson, describing sort of the learning challenge that companies face today, and it's just sort of two ideas. One is, what if we train them and they leave? And the other flip side is, what if we don't train them and they stay? That's the model. So what I would say to employers and HR people, and even line of business execs, is you want to get them to inculcate your culture so that when they do leave, they'll think fondly of you. So when they leave and go to a partner or start a company you want to buy or go work out in the supply chain or become a journalist or an analyst or whatever, you want them to think of your company in a good light. Oh yeah, I worked at company X and they treated me well. So when the RFP comes in or the offer to buy the company or whatever, they'll go, yeah, let's give them a shot. Let's engage them. They treated me well and they're worthy of consideration. So that's what I would say at a macro level to HR people.
No, I think so. You gave a very fascinating thought, right? So we did a survey at our company, sort of talking about the future of work, and then we realized that so one of the very interesting insight was that future would not be needing chefs, but it would be needing soupreneurs and sandwichpreneurs and all that, right? So you are pretty much vouching on the same thing, that they will be they will be working 4 or 5 jobs in a day to keep them excited about work. Now that side is beautiful for me, like who wants to sort of spend my maximum time creating as much value as I can. But imagine the situation for a restaurant that's relying on a lot of sandwichpreneurs and soupreneurs working in coherence to get a feel or experience for us. How difficult of a challenge is this for a business to sort of think of living in this gig economy, so-called?
Well, I think you make a good point. I mean, I think there are certain roles that will never be that flexible. I mean, you want a doctor in an emergency room to be there when the patients come in off the street. You want an airline pilot to show up and get ready to fly the plane, when you need someone to take you from point A to point B. So there are going to be roles that will not be adapting to this sort of gig economy, contingent worker model. But I think in general, you want to encourage people to be entrepreneurs within your company. So I've been running something I call Future Career Invention Workshops, a little pitch here, so forgive me. Indulge my description of this program. But what we do is point to companies and we work with employees to think about what their future job might be at that company based on, skills that they had that maybe are not being exploited, or other team members that a collaboration with whom a collaboration might generate some new and exciting role. The other thing we do is we talk about encouraging employees to think about a company that they would create that their parent company would want to buy, right? Based on white space or a gap, interacting with customers. What are customers telling them that they would like to see, or what are competitors doing? So again, keeping it in-house, getting companies to think about encouraging entrepreneurial spirit within their company to help them grow and lead and innovate.
Interesting. So one area sort of that I find really fascinating in today's ecosystem, and maybe I'm also paranoid about that vertical as well. the same time. So HR, right? So HR is very close to a corporate culture, right? They define culture, they enforce culture, they and when you talk about the entire ecosystem of future of work or the work or gig or task, how it's evolving every day, right? Now these HR is in the forefront of somehow this battle of this rapidly shifting world, rapidly shifting requirements for workers, and
Yeah.
then they have to protect and preserve the idea of culture, the idea of that, what they represent, so how would they come at peace with this two sort of very sort of different thoughts or different worlds now emerging faster than they could cope up? Like, what are some of the things that they could do, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, so I think, with all due respect, I think HR is going to be transformed, right? It's going to morph, because I think its historical role in protecting the business and protecting executives is delivering less value than it has. I think it's being incorporated more and more into marketing as marketing becomes the lines blur between internal and external marketing. You know, you're marketing to customers, you're marketing to employees. Employees are customers. I think to a large degree in smart companies, HR is being subsumed or collaborating with marketing. I think eventually it probably will go away, and it'll be much more closely tied to the business. So I'm a firm believer in Tom Malone's philosophy. Tom Malone is an MIT professor who wrote a seminal book called The Future of Work. And he postulates that in the next decade or so, companies will consist of a small number of people with core skills around, say, strategy, marketing, operations, and the rest of the business will be run via a network. So it'll be similar to the way movies are made, right? So people will come together based on skill sets. There'll be a quote unquote director or producer, which will be sort of the parent company, if you will, and they'll do whatever is required. Whether it's designing and building a battleship, or writing a bunch of AI code, or conjuring some new product launch, and they'll do the project however long it takes, and then they'll disband, and the teams will go on to do other things at other places. And there'll be sort of this core set of resources that kind of run the main business. But the days of like HR monitoring and scrutinizing and hiring and recruiting and firing people is going to go away. I think in the next decade, if not sooner. It's already happening. I mean, as the contingent workforce and the gig economy model takes over, HR doesn't really have a role in that space.
Interesting. So when you talk about HR and you talk about transformation, right? So and you're pointing out that definitely it's inevitable and it's fast. It's coming faster than anyone likes. So all I hear about is like borderless sort of when it comes to either their perception of a company, or whether it means as a learner or as an employee, as a future employee dealing with that company. I don't know where the border and how to, like, so how would that new landscape would work like? Because right now my honesty or my sort of loyalty, it's toward that culture, right? It's because skills come and go, skills change, we all grow into skills, but I became loyal to the message that the company was solving, and the culture is built around that message or whatever that thing is. What's your perspective on how would someone be able to form a company, and HR could be able to recruit those guys when everything is like gig and conceptual?
Well, I think it's, again, as you know, social media plays a larger and larger role, right? I mean, sites like Glassdoor, where you can go on the web and see what people think of the company and what they think about working there, and the level of transparency around employees' perspective on the work that gets done and the culture and how it's supported, the level of benefits, the kind of training that's offered, the behavior of the CEO, the C-suite. I mean, it's all, more and more it's available. I mean, sites like the Muse, again, that cater to millennial employees. I mean, the days of keeping the culture sort of hidden or as a black box are over. So and I think culture is becoming, business culture is becoming a much broader perspective than it has been. I mean, used to be able to say that sort of IBM had a culture, or maybe Aetna Insurance had a culture, or the New York Controller's Office had a culture. But nowadays, as the world is flat and we're all becoming digital citizens, culture is around how do you treat your employees, what are the benefits, opportunities, what's your record of corporate social responsibility, are you doing good in the world, is your technology enabling people to do good things, or is it causing kids to jump out of windows at Foxconn? They're, the people making iPhones, they're living in like barracks or whatever. So again, HR's role is going to be minimalized because people can see what companies do and they can interact. They can follow the company on Twitter. They can look at Glassdoor. They can look at Facebook pages. So I think companies need to be aware of how they represent themselves, more broadly on the planet.
Interesting. So I think one thing that I think about. So I'm coming from the technology end into this equation, right? So as a technologist, what keeps me up at night is like having more reliance to do your business on technology, right? So because if you look in the past, so there are two things when you want to do a business. There's the art of doing business and then science of doing business, right? So art of doing business is okay. So that's the culture, that's the hack that you figured out you're exploiting and sort of creating a value and sort of leveraging that. And the science is pretty much like how you operationalize it, how you use technology to deliver the value quickly, faster, cheaper, right? So now if we talk about and to me HR is that vertical that secure the art somehow, right? So now with this new advent of when technology is out there, transparency is at its maximum, how would a business can keep up, say, these cultural nuggets? Because if we set a bar at my employee should be happy or how I take care of them, the AI can quickly scan over and this competency would be available to everyone under the sun who can use that AI, right? Now, what's the core competency for the business would be? So, what's your thought and take on that?
Well, I think at the end of the day, I mean, to your point, you've got to be creating and delivering value, right? So that's what drives a culture, at its core. Like, what is the company doing that's contributing to business and to culture and the planet, and certainly companies have different perspectives on how to do that and what the values are, and they vary widely. I mean, some companies have very niche kinds of approaches. I mean, I think of a company like LinkedIn that's very much into promoting like an open culture, that embraces kind of diversity. And I mean, their mission is to match skills with opportunity at a massive, global scale. Other companies are focused on innovating in niche kinds of areas. And I think the thing I found about Silicon Valley, for example, I spent some time out there over the past few years, just at events and listening to people talk and meeting with executives. And the thing that I found fascinating is that and this is simplistic, but generally they have a big picture, long-term, strategic, global perspective on what they're doing. And I think that's an approach that millennials certainly embrace, and that really we should all embrace. I mean, they're not just cranking out products and selling stuff to make money. They have a bigger picture perspective. Now, they're monopolies to some degree, but I'm encouraged by companies like Google, for example, has a whole Google X portfolio where they're putting money into moonshots, things that don't translate directly to attributable revenue, may never do that. That may be spun off like Waymo, autonomous vehicles, right? That's now a business unit that's more focused on generating some revenue. But it's great that they have the money and that they have the vision to do those kinds of things. I think that's exciting.
Interesting. And how do you anticipate the workplace, what would be that, right? So in this emerging world, uh, what would happen to the future of workplace?
Well, I think it's going to be a hybrid model. We're already seeing it evolving, right? I mean, when I worked at IBM, 20 years ago, there were cubicles. I had a cubicle
Mm,
on Madison and 57th Street. I think we're going to see more and more, obviously, virtual work, right?
mm,
If you can get online now, you're at work. So whether you're in a Starbucks or on a train or in a bus or in your car, if it's an autonomous vehicle, it's being driven by somebody, or the Google buses that drive people from downtown San Francisco down to the South Bay.
mm,
I think we're going to see tools like AR and VR really transform how people work. I mean, I'll always see people sitting at a desk. I mean, here I am. I
mm,
got my mouse and my computer.
mm.
So it'll be hybrids, but the ability of technology to transform how we interact and collaborate and solve problems is going to be exciting. Again, I was just at an AR conference at the MIT Media Lab a few weeks ago, and companies like Meta, demonstrating headsets and the
Mm.
HoloLens, Microsoft, where you can res out a browser and res out a whiteboard and res out a spreadsheet and share it with anybody on the planet and work on it together. And there'll still be a need for carbon-based life forms getting together in a room in a physical space, but we're going to have expanded opportunities to interact and work together.
Interesting.
Leverage. Yeah.
Fascinating. So, by the way, and thank you so much for sharing your perspective on that. So, if I'm a business, right, how can I future proof myself? Like, what are some of the things that you could suggest me as a business that I could do to ensure I exist tomorrow?
Well, so you've got to be aware of your portfolio, right? How are you delivering value? So looking at competitors, use your market intelligence, business intelligence. Even if you're an old company or a new company, it's at the end of the day, customers pay for what they think delivers
Hmm.
value. So, and I would encourage companies to work with employees and with competitors, co-competitors, whatever. Work with unlikely partners, people in the supply chain, whomever, to innovate, to get ahead of the curve in terms of what the market will support, what the market will reimburse you for. And in terms of employees, I would hire employees or work with contingent workers, gig economy workers.
Hmm.
Don't necessarily follow the guidelines in historical job recs. I would say if the person aligns with 50% of your job rec and has a bunch of other skills that maybe aren't listed in what the person who was in that job did before, I would hire them and encourage them and give them rope, give them air cover from a P&L if you need to, whatever. I mean,
Hmm.
I think there's a story about this sort of state insurance company that had an intern, a young woman, doing social media for them one summer,
Hmm.
and she did really great stuff, and they loved her work, and they offered her a job, like come fall or whatever, and she turned it down. And like, well, why did you turn it down? She's like, well, you have no social media strategy tied to attributable revenue. Like it's not in your business strategy. So why would I work here? I mean, you're obviously not getting it. So
Hmm.
my response to those execs would be, you should have hired her, given her a
Hmm.
VP position, hired
Hmm.
a team for her, given her a big budget, and walk away and let her like do her thing. The reason I was saying at IBM, if you want something done that's bleeding edge, you got to find people who don't know it's supposed to be hard.
Right.
you know.
Very relevant. I think it's
So,
very well crafted, and then certainly even I could use that as well. So now
yeah,
let's go on the other side of the spectrum, the people part, right? So if I want to be future proof, what are some of the
yeah.
thoughts that I you could suggest me doing?
So I would say again, I have these sort of three secret ingredients. I call them voice, antenna, and mesh. So I'll go into that a little bit again, back to pitching my worldview. But the voice thing is like figuring out what you do that no one else can do, or what is your unique skill set based on what you've done your whole life, or what you've studied, or jobs you've had, or whatever. What is it that makes you unique? And there are ways to figure it out. There are all kinds of online assessment tools, But I think just sitting down and sort of listing out, like if someone said to you, oh, yeah, Chris Bishop, he's a great whatever. They might say,
Mm.
well, he's a great bass player. He's a great communicator. He's a good writer. He's obviously a technology guy. He's a futurist. So that's kind of my 4 or 5 criteria. So each person should be doing that and knowing that it's going to change and morph, but that it's a core set of skills that you have. We all come into the world kind of wired to a certain degree, being able to do certain things.
Mm.
And I still know how to play the bass. I've been doing it for years, but it's something that I was drawn to and that I continue to do. So that's a starting point. The second piece of this is around antenna. So looking at what's going on the planet from a business, a cultural, a technological, a political, a social perspective, and seeing how that translates to mapping your value into that evolving model. So like for me, being a bass player in New York, I realized I couldn't really just play electric bass and make a living, but technology was going to allow me with computers and samplers and sequencers to take the music skills and adopt the new technology and be successful in this new model. So that's at a very specific level. That's how you can think about taking skills and looking what's going on the planet. So where would you work in AI? I'm sorry, if I was speaking to like millennials in the workplace or Gen Z in college, like, where would you take your skills or your passion and apply it to robotics or to biotech or to sustainable energy or to space travel, right? Where would that work? And then the third part of it is mesh, which is sort of Venn diagram, the network of networks. Where do you intersect and who can help you be successful looking at the antenna findings and mapping your voice to it? Who you need to meet that can help you do it. And like my mesh includes musicians. It includes people from IBM. It includes, college friends. It includes people in the futurist community, and people in academia. So I sort of map those and figure out how to connect those dots and be successful. That's what I've been doing.
Interesting. And you talked about, I think we were talking before the interview about how do you figure out the trends to predict the future of work or where the future of work is going. Like, could you walk us through some of those? Like, what if I want to see the sense of where the industry is going for me, or at least as a business or as a professional? Like, what are some of the places I can look at?
Yeah. So I would say again, there are sort of meta tools and they're more specific tools. So, like if you're interested in investing in financial, have a financial services perspective, that's what you're passionate about, you have skills in, I would say there are sources you should track down, like websites like AngelList or print and web publications like Silicon Valley Business Journal. I would look at Bloomberg Technology and see kind of where the money's going, right? That's a lot of that is very visible, and you see, what companies are getting funded, because the indication, right, the implication is that somebody thinks there's a pony in there. You can make some money if you invest in this company. If you're, figure out, again, if you're interested in, say, doing good, like, or social causes or civic tech, look at companies that are doing things that are focused in those areas. There are a lot of successful entrepreneurs now that are taking their money and rather than buying a boat or America's Cup yacht like Larry Ellison, are starting companies that are focused on doing good and solving, big problems. I mean, look at what Bill and Melinda Gates are doing at their foundation. Track down people in those kinds of organizations to see what they're doing and how your skills might be applied to deliver value to an organization.
Interesting. So let's talk about some of the things that you find fascinating or you're worried about the future. So what are some things that you are hopeful about when it comes to the future of work or future of jobs?
Well, I'm certainly excited about the potential to transform education with technology, because that's where it kind of begins. We need to get like elementary school kids thinking about the fact that they're going to do jobs that don't exist now, and that their parents scratch their heads and go, "You're going to do what? You're going to be a robotic ethicist consultant for the pharmaceutical industry? I mean, how is that going to work?" So,
Interesting.
and then we need to get teachers thinking about what they're going to teach and how they're going to prepare kids. Now, I think education is a challenging space because they don't have a P&L, and they kind of, some teachers think of themselves as teaching for the ages. And some of that is good, but there's a great book, Fareed Zakaria, In Defense of a Liberal Education. I think that's where learners need to focus, is having a broad-based set of, influences. So studying humanities, study Greek literature, study, astrophysics, whatever. Because again, the people companies like Google hire have broad-based backgrounds and experience, right? There's a great interview with Laszlo Bach, the former chief people officer at Google. He's now left to go to a startup, but Thomas Friedman, the New York Times op-ed writer and author, right, author of The World is Flat, interviewed him, and they described what does it take to work at Google, and they focus on things like being a creative problem solver, being resourceful and resilient, being comfortable with ambiguity, being able to work across disciplines, being able to understand your role as a global citizen, and being able to work in this emergent leadership model, articulate a perspective clearly and quickly, but being able to acquiesce and go with a better solution or a different solution if it gets to end of job and solves the problem that the team is trying to solve. Like, expertise was like the last thing on his list. Now, that said, there are legions of coders at Google, writing code and doing the latest updates to search and Google Docs and Gmail or whatever. But at a meta level, the stuff that's going to drive the company forward are people with those kinds of skills. Right?
So, Interesting. So if we talk, so by the way, thank you so much, Chris. You fascinating perspective. Definitely love to know. So now let's get on you for a few minutes. So if we talk about you and your journey so far, what are some of the ingredients for your success, if you can share? Like, what are some of the things that really helped you stay sane throughout the years, through the 7 journeys, or now on the 8th one, and then helping us all understand the future? So walk us through that.
Well, I think again, kids today, whomever, in the sort of global borderless workplace that we find ourselves in the 21st century, right? You need to be prepared to learn, unlearn, and relearn. Sort of where we started this conversation, right? Where the podcast began with Bennington College. Like figuring out what you need to know, figuring out what you want to do, and figuring out what you need to know, and then figuring out how to learn it and learning it, and doing that again and again. So for me, again, when I moved to New York to work as a freelance bass player, I really didn't know. There were a couple of things I needed to learn how to do. One was learn how to sight read well, and learn how to bebop tunes, how to work with a fake book or a real book. And I was in a couple of sessions where I got my butt kicked because I didn't know how to do those things. So I was like, if I'm going to work in New York City with these guys and gals, I better learn how to do that. So I went to a music school, learned how to sight read, took classes and attended sessions and whatever. And I tracked down a friend of mine from college who knew how to play bebop, and he showed me how to work with a real book and how to improvise over changes and learn sort of the attendant set of standards that you need to learn. So if someone calls a tune, you know it. We're going to do All of Me. Ready? F. Count it off. Here we go. So those kinds of lessons. I've done that over and over, working as a web producer, working in social media, working in virtual worlds, working in business strategy at IBM. Like, what's the gap? Being able to candidly and honestly assess what the delta is, and then figure out how to address it.
Interesting. Let's talk about your favorite read. Do you have a favorite read that you can share with our viewers and listeners?
Well, I'm a big fan of Economist, which may sound surprising, but Rashir Sharma wrote a book called Breakout Nations a few years ago. He's got a book too, which I want to pick up. But at the end of the day, it's business, right? We're talking about future jobs. It's about business. So he's like forgive me, it's just inaccurate. He's like a McKinsey, like a senior McKinsey consultant, but he writes about trending in business and economies. He wrote about the BRIC countries and then the civets, the next generation of emerging markets where businesses will grow, right? Based on skill and labor arbitrage and rules and regulatory issues, how easy it is to start and run a business there, or for a multinational to set up a business there. So that's a book I like. Industries of the Future by Alec Ross is a great book. Right, he was a policy wonk. He worked for Hillary Clinton in the State Department when she was there. That book I showed you, The New Rules of Work, I think is a fascinating by Kate Minshew, the woman who started the website The Muse, sort of aimed at millennials, writing a social-based job portal. And I read Disrupted, the book by Dan Lyon about his years at HubSpot. That's a pretty funny book.
That's
although
nice.
Kind of, because I spent a year at Proxycom, which is like a sort of systems integrator posing as a full service internet company. I left IBM for a year, was recruited at the height of the dot-com bubble and worked there. I knew on the first day that it was a bad move, and I was able to go back to IBM. But I mean, that's a funny book, insight into like a middle-aged guy from a traditional journalism background going to work at a startup, digital marketing company. The Da Vinci biography is out. I'm reading that. Stephen Johnson, How We Got to Now, is a fascinating book. He has 6 categories, sort of game-changing technologies: glass, cold. I mean, it's a really interesting book. Big picture perspective on, again, technology that disrupted the global economy, and certainly the implication is, jobs and industries that were tied to them. So those are a few, anyway.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. And that brings us to the close of the interview. So we ask all of our guests about their closing remark that they could share with our viewers and listeners. What's your closing remark?
So I would say, as you mentioned before, I mean, a lot of kids are sort of apprehensive and depressed and anxious about, what's going to happen in the future of work. But I would say, take a deep breath and be excited about it, because you're going to do stuff that's going to look like magic to me. So get to it. I mean, there are opportunities to work, but more broadly transform businesses, and even more broadly transform culture and society in ways that have never been possible before, by leveraging technologies like AI and robotics and algorithms and transhumanism and biotech and on and on. Areas where you're going to be able to innovate and create new stuff that didn't exist. Again, at the intersection of, say, disciplines that haven't historically connected in areas like medicine, like nanopharmacy, mechanical engineering at the micro up to nano level, and pharmacology at the atomic or molecular level. I mean, you're going to do stuff in sustainable energy, certainly in healthcare, in education, in business writ large, using virtual and augmented reality tools to interact. Traveling in space. Space tourism is a big business, right? Mining rare earth minerals on the moon. That's a next area of exploitation. Elon Musk, put his Tesla Roadster on a journey to Mars. He's talking about building a colony on the red planet within 10 to 20 years. So there's really interesting, exciting stuff, jobs that are out there that you can do. So I'd say get out there and start exploring, start creating, start innovating, start working.
That's fascinating, Chris. I think with that's a very, very nice thought for our listeners and viewers. Thank you so much for being so generous with your time and helping us understand what the future of work would look like, and how the business and as a professional, what companies and professionals could do to survive in that. You're always welcome on the show. I know you're one of the book is in queue. So once it gets baked, definitely want to have you over. And thank you so much.
Thanks for the opportunity. It's been great talking with you. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Yeah, I thought I was sick of home, but actually I was homesick. Never really knew that I would have to grow up so quick. I'm so uncomfortable, don't know anybody here. Just a couple dudes that I met once, that's it. And I go into the booth feeling nervous. Got butterflies in my stomach like I'm so worthless. Is the mic on? I don't know how to work this. Inside I'm breaking down, I hope I'm not up on the